What's today?
What's today?
It's National Bee Day.
Join us as we talk to Roger about the birds and the bees.
We just talk about the bees.
This podcast is brought to you by RAMM Horse Fencing and Stalls, the one-stop shop for your horse farm. RAMM is family-owned and operated and has been in business for over 30 years. We welcome you to call in and speak with an expert about your next project today at 866-653-8984. Again, that's 866-653-8984.
Welcome to Late Night Riders. I'm Gretchen, and I'm joined by my mom, Kristen, my grandma, Debbie, and Roger.
Hey, Roger.
Hello.
Roger, can you tell us a little bit about your thriving honey business?
Well, I'm a local beekeeper in Fulton County, Ohio. We run approximately 100 beehives all over. I don't keep a lot of bees in any one spot because they need forage, and there's not humongous amounts of forage in any one spot. So I have about 10 locations that I have bees at.
And one of those locations happens to be your farm.
Yes, we just set up 3, I guess I'd say hives. Roger helped, and they're doing very, very well.
Yeah. So how did you get started in bees?
Well, we got started, my wife and I had gotten married. We lived in Toledo, but my whole family lived in Fulton County, and she worked in Toledo. I was working in Waterville, so we wanted to move out to the country. And we found a place right on the edge of Fulton County, and the first year we had a garden, and the watermelons wouldn't pollinate. And there was no local bees to pollinate our watermelons. So I had a friend who was a beekeeper, and I asked him to train us how to do bees. So the next year we had 1 hive of bees. And bees have a way of multiplying, and you fall in love with them. So the next year we had 2 at the house, and my uncle had a small orchard, so he had a couple. So we go to 4 hives, and then they get ready to swarm, so you split them and you make more, and that multiplies. So pretty soon you got 10 and 15 and 20, and the wife's going, isn't that enough bees? And it's taking too much time. And then you find that you can sell some honey to help subsidize your hobby, right? The cost. So now you got honey customers, so you got to make sure that they have honey all the time. So, the 20 becomes maybe 30. And several years ago, I lost my job, and there wasn't a lot of jobs out there that I was fond of having. And I told my wife, I go, if I'm going to make minimum wage, we might as well just do bees. So we went from about 30 bees to 50 and to 100 then.
Wow.
So we kind of grew organically, little by little.
Well, you probably had to, because there's probably a huge learning curve in this whole thing too. How much acreage do you have to have in order to have a hive, do you think?
Very little. Right now, the big push is urban beekeeping. And there's lots of bees in towns, city bees. So a little lot in town, you can have a couple hives. Bees will travel approximately 2 miles from my hive. So if I draw a 2-mile circle around any of my hives, that's basically fair game. Any of the flowers in that 2 miles is fair game for my bees.
Which in a city you'd probably get lots of flowers, but what about the people, and how do they feel about bees?
Neighbors can be an issue, and there's a learning curve there too. A lot of times, once the neighbors find out that the bees aren't these evil little stinging things, I swear that everybody has fallen asleep in front of the TV and woke up at 2 a.m. with the honeybees taking over the world, and they're stinging everything. Because we get this conversation a lot, like, oh my God, and was at the state fair several years ago, and they were giving honey samples out. Well, there was some stray bees in the neighborhood, and they were coming over trying to get, a free taste of honey, and they'd fall in the jar, and I'd fish them out. And the bees would be walking up and down my arms because they're so sticky they can't fly, so they got to kind of clean themselves so they can be able to fly again. And these people, their eyes are as big as saucers, just thinking I'm going to get stung. And I go, no, until she feels threatened, she won't sting you. So, I mean, stinging is like the last defense that the bees want to do. They really want to go work. You got to keep the neighbors happy. And usually what I tell city people or people that are going to have real close neighbors, when you get that first jar of honey, you go over there and go, hey, the bees in my backyard made this honey, and that usually soothes things over. Bees are about like an airplane, they come straight, they got like a runway and a place where they're going to fly, so you really don't want to shoot them across your neighbor's lawn or across the sidewalk, or if you have horses, you wouldn't want to shoot them straight out through your pasture where the horses are going to be. Aim them, turn them.
So the direction of their opening in there is where you...
Yep, they come pretty much straight in, straight out. So
there's
like a flight pattern in front of the hives where they're coming out.
I wanted to ask you too. I know you were talking about how you kind of got started, but did you just yourself taught then in all of this with the bees? I mean, can anybody kind of just get started, or do they need to have some? Did you have some basics or whatever that?
I read a book, the beginner book, like we tell everybody, read the beginner book, and then the first time you read it, it's usually pretty Greek because there's a lot of terminology in there that you don't understand. And so you get your bees, and then you reread the book, and you reread it the next winter.
It starts to make a little more sense.
Then it makes more sense. And I joined a local bee club. There's a lot of knowledge there. So you talk to people. I've been to conferences. And
grows from there then.
It grows from there. I was in beekeeping before the internet, so now with the internet, I mean, YouTube, there's a video of everything. I'm sure just like horses, if you were in horsing before the internet, you learned a lot on your own, but now it's like, holy cow, look at all this easy stuff. You can just watch it.
Exactly.
But I'm sure there's good and bad bee videos too, and there's people doing things that you just cringe that, it's like, oh, that's not really the proper way to do things, but but the internet's marvelous for helping teach people, and but the one-on-one conversations people still need. We all are probably have a Facebook page that we look at, and the new horse people are probably just as crazy as the new bee people, and it's like such a simple question, but they just freak out over lots of little things.
So what's the best thing to do for people that aren't familiar with bees? Say, even if you were talking about a little bit that they really don't want to sting you, so what's the best thing to do if like you're around bees, or what's how do you kind of you don't want to flick them off of your...
Well, you don't want to swat at them. If you just try to leave them alone and just walk away. I could see where if you were trail riding someday and there happened to be a tree with some wild bees in it, like in oak openings, the bees would probably get stuck in the horse's hair. But if it's anything like my dog, when the bee gets stuck in the hair of even people or the dog, the bee freaks out, it revs up, and it makes your dog just freak out too. And we have a dog with longer hair, and he only got she only had the bee in her hair once, and after that the dogs know to leave the bees alone. You don't even go over by the beehive. So, but I could see where if you were riding a horse and it got caught in its mane or something, and it could hear it buzzing, it might not be a fun ride too. And you kill the bees as quick as possible.
But the honeybees are different than other bees. So, do you know the difference between the bees and how to tell the difference between the bees? Well,
most people are familiar with Yellowjackets. Yellowjackets live in the ground. They come boiling out. They have an attitude, and I could see where trail riding with them could be a real hazard.
That's true.
They're in the wasp family, so they can sting multiple times. Mm-hmm. The honeybee only stings you once. It has a barb on the end of the stinger, so the stinger stays like in your arm or wherever you get stung. It stays there, and the bee flies away, and it has a little gland that pulsates and keeps putting venom in you. So if you get stung by a bee and you look down or anything, and you can see like this little hair hanging on you, that's a bee, scratch it out, and you'll get a lot less venom.
Do the wasps, you said they can sting several times?
Yes.
Are they crabbier than
yes.
Yellowjackets? So the
Yellowjackets,
wasps are the ones
Yellowjackets are in the wasp family, so they're basically a wasp in the wasp. So they all can sting multiple times. They're more like a hypodermic needle with no
like a barb. Yeah.
Yep. There's no barb, so it's like ding, 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 and of course they all come boiling out and they're mad. And beekeepers don't like the Yellowjackets either because they will attack beehives.
Really?
And there's some nice sugar in there, but really they want the larvae because it's full of protein. So they'll try to raid weak hives, especially late summer, like when they're in the garbage cans and all that kind of stuff.
So the wasps, when you're I'm thinking when we're riding our horses and things like that, the best thing again you don't want to just slap them with your hand, or what can you tell us maybe as people who ride horses, what would our best thing, leave them alone, get away from them first of all,
right.
I'm sure.
Yep.
Try to avoid them, get away if they're in, you don't want to swat at them, so just ride forward, maybe get away, and then if they keep on being persistent,
just keep on going.
Okay.
Just get out of their area, and eventually they will go back home to defend defend their hive. Bees.
Do they make honey? Do they do anything? What?
I don't know what they do.
Do anything? I mean,
what do they even do?
Anything? Yeah, what are they here for?
Why
are they here?
I answer that. I answer
They're
that
just
question.
An insect, like a mosquito that does whatever it does. Huh?
When we were in Oak Openings, we were there for a field trip, and we came over a bridge, and there was a beehive under there, and they came out and they swarmed. There was one casualty of one of our friends that just got stung, and we just ran. I mean, the most of us just ran, and other people stayed with him to try to help him out. It was terrifying.
Run for your lives. Run for your lives.
There's always going to be a casualty, I think, in that. So yeah, he probably got stung like 20 times, but you have to run.
You don't have to run as fast as the wasps. You just have to run faster than the slowest person. So they get it.
There you go.
So what do you do if there's like a swarm on your barn near your horses? Do you call someone or?
Very good question. Yeah. Call a local beekeeper. There's websites that advertise, like the Ohio State Beekeepers on their website have a drop-down page of people that will pick up swarms, and it's all by county, so you can look up somebody from your county and come over. Beekeepers want swarms. It's free bees. So there's $150 hanging on your barn or whatever. Last year I got called to a lean-to at somebody's horse's barn. They swarmed up in the corner, but when they swarm, they're usually very docile. They have everything they have to defend in their belly. So when the bees swarm out of a hive, they fill up on honey because they don't know how long it's going to be till they find a new home to set up. So they're carrying all their food with them, the babies and all their excess foods back at the old hive. So they're very docile. They just hang out, and they're trying to find a new home.
Why do they leave the hive if it's something that they had and that's their home?
That's Mother Nature's way of making two hives out of one.
Okay.
So bees have been on the face of the earth for about 10 million years. So until man took over about 2,000 years ago, maybe 3, bees would just split. So in the spring, they have all this honey coming in, the queen's laying like crazy. Well, pretty soon they start to run out of room. and that's kind of their trigger to the old queen and about half the workers take off to find a new home. They are raising a new queen back in the original hive, and all the workers that are staying and all the new babies that are hatching stay and take over. So now Mother Nature just made 2 hives.
So that's in nature.
Yep.
That's not like when you guys are doing your beekeeping, you guys do you add
We
more boxes?
we add more boxes. As a beekeeper, we try to keep all the bees at home. That's a lot easier said than done. We want the big workforce because the big workforce will make lots of honey to, for us to eat or sell or whatever you want to do with it. But they still swarm. I got some hives that they swarmed this spring. We were talking about the wet weather. I got some lanes. I just couldn't get back. I got one hive or one group of hives. I've only been there twice all year because I can't get back because it's too wet. I don't own a 4-wheeler. I don't know if my tax man will let me, write off a 4-wheeler so I can go visit a few beehives, but it happens. It's just part of it. Bees are, even though we own them and have them in a box in our yard, they're still pretty much a wild animal. They're not domesticated. They pretty much, this is natural things that they do, and we as humans try to manipulate it, but they still do pretty much what they want to do.
So when the bees swarm and say they're like in the shed, the queen bee is not with them. It's just the workers that take off. There's a queen with them.
The old queen is in the middle.
Them.
She's hanging there, and it's usually wherever she kind of crash lands because she's the biggest flyer. They follow her. So
they will follow
she gets tired. She needs a rest. We've picked up swarms just about everywhere. I mean, they could land on a fence post. They could land on the edge of the barn. Yeah. It's usually a tree or something, but she lands and everybody groups around her. So you got this big ball of bees and.
So when I've seen people take them and shake them right out of a branch, but when they're in like the shed like that, I just wondered, I'm just curious, how do you kind of scoop them down and get them in? What do you do?
The way I usually do it is I always carry old frames with me, some old dark frames that smells like their old house.
Okay.
So they're really attracted to that. So I'll usually. If I got to scoop them like I scooped them off that barn I would put that frame up there and let them start crawling on it. And then I will take a brush and just brush some down on the frame and put that in a box, and then take another frame, brush some more, and you just keep brushing. And some of them are going to fly, so you just keep doing this. And if you find the queen and she goes in the box, it's like magic. Then they all will follow her. So I usually do this a couple times, then I'll take a little break and look around, see what goes on. If they're not getting too excited, well, then I scrape some more off, because sometimes they're on a branch or on a tree where, like the trunk of the tree, you can't cut the tree down. No. You can't shake it, so you got to kind of brush them off. And
works then.
A couple weeks ago I was doing this, and I brushed a few times and had a bunch of them in the box, and then I was taking my break to see what was going on. I had some phone calls to make, so I'm talking to a guy, and all of a sudden, all the bees start flying, and I'm going, oh, no. I'm just agreeing with this. Yep. Because I'm not sure if they're all getting ready to take off, like they're coming out of the box and the tree limb, and everybody's going to fly away or what. And by the time, it's 1 minute, and by then I get over there, and the bees that were on the tree had decided the queen was in the box. We're all going to join her, and they fly around and they all go in the box.
That's neat.
If you put them on the ground, sometimes they call it marching, like soldiers. She's in the box, and all the bees that are on the ground will just march right in the box because they smell her, and some of the bees will be out there fanning. And what they're doing is they have a gland on them that's like, this is the house. So they sit there and move their wings to fan air across it to drift the smell so everybody else knows where home is.
So sweet.
So what do you do when the queen dies? Like how the queen has to die at some point. How does a new queen become the queen?
That is the magic of bees. All right. The queen is mated, so she lays fertilized but she can also lay unfertilized eggs. So all the workers in the hive are girls. They are all a fertilized egg. The male drones are an unfertilized egg. So any fertilized egg has the potential to be a queen bee. And the way they do it is they take this egg. It's an egg for 3 days. It hatches into a little tiny larvae. And at that point, all the larvae get I think it's 12 hours of a substance called royal jelly. Royal jelly is a glandular substance that the bees make themselves. They feed all the larvae for 12 hours. Well, the one they want to turn into a queen, she gets that for 6 days. So by feeding this larvae royal jelly, it converts it from being just a worker bee into a queen bee. By what they feed it. So that's really so like cool. The magic. I mean, every worker bee has the potential to be a queen by what the other bees feed it. So it's spring. We're planning on swarming, so they will raise a whole bunch of queens.
Oh, okay.
They don't raise just one to replace her. The other day I was in a hive. I think I came home with 6 virgin queens plus some that weren't quite old enough. I know there was at least one live one in the hive because I seen that. So they raise multiple ones, and they all hatch about the same time because the bees started them at the same time. So gestation period is all the same. The book will tell you the first one out will go around and try to kill our competition. So that will happen. If you let all the virgin queens run around in the hive, they will start to fight each other. And the queen stinger doesn't have a barb on it, so she'll go around and try to sting it. They will sting them while they're still in a cell before they hatch. They will rip the side out and sting that little larvae. Wow. So I was cutting some open, and I'm looking, well, this one's not quite old enough. You know, if I would have gave it 2 or 3 days, it could have been a queen, but I got more queens than I know what to do with. But if I would just left it in the hive, the bees would have killed it anyway. So you kind of justify this. So as a beekeeper, I harvested a bunch of queens. I take them back. I put them in a new box with some bees and like a 1 frame of brood, and then they're queenless, so there's no queen in there, so they will accept this new queen. She will go out. Queens mate in the air outside the hive. It's about the only time the queen will leave a hive is to swarm or mate. So she'll go out on a nice, beautiful day. She gets mated by some drones, and she comes back, and then the queen's job basically is to lay eggs.
Yep.
And she will lay up to 2,000 eggs a day in her prime during a spring season. So she just lays eggs. She takes a break every once in a while, and the other bees come along. They feed her, they clean her, they take care of her, they groom her, and then she goes off and lays off another bunch of eggs.
It's pretty cool.
So do the worker bees take care of the queen, or what do the drones do then at some point? I mean, you've got some of your drones, okay, they were with the queen, some were with the queen, some were not, then you've got drones and worker girl bees.
Yep.
Okay.
And the drones, they don't have to do anything. They're so doggone lazy, they don't even feed themselves. They wait for the girls to come over and feed them.
Really?
So, and their job mainly is to pass on genetics. In the fall, though, you know, we got all these boy bees. It's September, October. Right. They're all hanging out in the hive, watching TV, watching the football games, drinking beer or drinking the honey. The girls decide, hey, winter's coming. You guys aren't doing anything. It's time to get rid of you guys. And the girl bees will wrestle the boy drone bees out to the front entrance. And, of course, if you're rustling long enough, when you get to the front entrance and the girls let go of you, you fly away. You fly out, but they don't let you back in. So come end of the year, all the drones get kicked out to die
Girls'
from
world.
hypothermia,
No.
and it's a girl's world.
Wow. And then they stay inside and they do fan or do whatever they need to do to keep the temperature just right through the winter.
It is a very intricate
It is.
thing that they do. In the summertime, the bees generate heat, and the way they generate heat is they twitch their wing muscles, which is the biggest muscle in their body, to generate heat, because they're basically a cold-blooded animal, insect. So they generate heat by moving their muscles and in the wintertime they'll be in a big ball all together, and they're like shivering, like if a whole room of us would get together and we all get in a huddle and shiver to keep warm. That's basically what the bees do. They eat their honey. That's their food. They eat it all winter. The bees on the outside eat some honey. They pass it mouth to mouth to the other bees. In the summertime, like now, well, in spring it'll start to warm up. They'll go outside. The bees don't go to the bathroom inside their hive, so they got to hold it during cold spells. So on a nice sunny day, even when it's like 40 degrees and there's no wind, the bees will come out, go to the bathroom, and come back in. So we like those nice, a nice warm winter day so the bees can do their thing with lots of sun. They start laying eggs. They got to raise the temperature. They keep their temperature in the hive around 92 degrees. So the ball of bees is always 92.
It's amazing that they can do. It's like the 92 degrees is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So you can go in there on a cool day and put your hand over the hive, open up, and you can feel the heat coming out, what they're generating. Well, summer comes along and it's 92 degrees outside already, so it gets too hot, so they start fanning, and you'll see bees on the front of the box, and they're basically moving air just like you would turn a fan on. So that's their air conditioning, because they can't allow it get too hot in there or the baby bees will die and all that. So we have ways to try to let a little more air in for the bees. We open up the entrance like wide open, kind of like opening up the barn doors and turning the fan on for the horses. Same kind of thing. Bees control all this. They gather water, like all living things. Bees need water, so they'll bring water in the summertime, and they, just a little drop here, a little drop there, but by moving air across it, it acts like a swamp cooler. So that's, as the water evaporates, it's taking the heat away. So that's how they help cool their hive. And then it all repeats back in the wintertime.
Doesn't the humidity stay a certain level too in the
Yeah,
hive
they
as
control
well?
humidity in there.
And
I'm not sure where their humidity is, but they have an
it's all
ideal humidity.
controlled.
Yep. By moving water in, getting rid of water in the summertime, all the nectar that's coming in is mainly water that they dehydrate by moving air across it. So that's part of cooling of the hive, is just drying the honey down.
So my girls, I've seen them come in and they have the pollen on their legs. Call them their pantaloons, but I know they probably have pockets. I know it's pockets, but it's from orange, like a pretty orange, to a yellow to almost a white. And then my question is then, is that just the flowers? And then what do they do with the pollen? And do you know how they actually make the honey then in the summer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The pollen's in the flower. It's parts of the flower, the bees move the pollen in the flowers, so the flowers pollinate and reproduce. So, but the bees are actually gathering that pollen to take back. That's their protein source. Pollen's high in protein, so they take that, they gather
in a
that.
Pocket?
Well,
is it in a pocket in their legs, or?
They have some static electricity on them, and actually honeybees they're covered with hairs. It's not scaly. There's small hairs. The little pollen particles attract to it. The worker bee will stop every now and then, and she basically cleans herself. So she licks all this pollen up, and she deposits on some really long hairs on the back of her back leg, and it's called a pollen sac. So when she comes home, it looks like there's like 2 little BBs on her back legs, and pollen comes about any color under the sun. Okay. I mean, I've seen purple, I've seen red, I've seen white, it's brown, it's all colors. Different flowers have different colors of pollen. It doesn't matter what the color of the flower is. In fact, we used to always say when we'd see the red in the spring, oh, they're in the redbud trees, till I was taking a picture of some bees in the redbud trees this year, and they were covered with white pollen. So, the petals are red, but the pollen's white in those flowers. So, we have to change that. But there's lots of weeds, lots of things that
clover, whatever.
They love clover, but I was mushroom hunting this spring in the middle of this woods, and we stop, and you're looking around for mushrooms, and all of a sudden I hear bees buzzing. And of course, being a beekeeper, I mean, it would only take one bee, and I'd go, hey, there's bees around here somewhere. And I look around, and there's bees are on this plant, and I couldn't even tell that there was a flower on it.
Really?
But it was something they were attracted to. There was bees all over it. They were working the heck out of it. So in the middle of the woods, but they can find what they want. So they basically are gathering pollen to take back. They mix a little honey with it, and at that point, the beekeepers, we call it bee bread. They basically mix just a little honey with this pollen. It kind of ferments, and then that's how they eat the pollen. They eat it, and then they regurgitate it, and that's what they feed to, like, the larvae and stuff. That's what they use for their energy.
So does the honey come from the
pollen?
Nectar.
The honey comes from the other part of the plant in the flowers, and that's the nectar.
Oh, okay.
The nectar is a sweet, sugary substance that's in the flower. It's mainly water, but the bees will have a prosopis, is what they call their tongue, but it's more like a straw, and you'll see their tongue come out, and like if you put a little drop of honey on something, you'll see their tongue come out, and pretty soon that drop's gone. So they suck that up. The worker bees basically have like a 2-stage stomach. And then the first stage is called the honey pouch, or the honey stomach. And the other one, they have a little valve between that, and then that's where all their food would go. So they hold all this honey in their honey stomach, go back to the hive, they suck all this up. She's full of honey. She can't hold it anymore. She goes back to the hive. She regurgitates it to another worker bee, who will then take it and put it in one of the hexagons, the honeycomb, and they regurgitate it again, put it in there. But inside that pouch, there's special enzymes. And when those enzymes mix with the nectar, that's what converts it into honey. And that's what makes the honeybee very unique, is it's the only bee that makes honey. All the other, like, native bees in Ohio or anywhere, they gather pollen to feed their bees, but they feed it pretty much straight pollen to their baby bees. So all bees are good. They all do some pollination. They all have their niche in society, in Mother Nature's bee world, and ecological, but only the honeybee makes honey.
Wow.
When you harvest the honey, then how do you know how much to harvest and how much to leave for them? Because you're taking their food source at that point, correct? And the royal jelly, because that's extremely expensive.
The royal jelly,
most beekeepers don't harvest royal jelly. The royal jelly you're getting at like a health food store is coming probably from China, because they have cheap labor. Because when they're raising a queen, there might be, each queen, I doubt there's even a 1/16 of a teaspoon in, like, what they're feeding. We'll look at it and go, oh, man, look at all that royal jelly. But, I mean, if you were going to put it in a measuring thing, it wouldn't be very much.
Okay.
And so you can see it. You can actually tell it. Is it in a cell, or is it just...
It's in the cell that they're raising the queen.
Okay.
The queens, she isn't hatched out of a normal honeycomb because she's going to be bigger. She actually, it looks like a really small peanut.
Okay.
And it will hang down, and they put the royal jelly in there. But it's more whitish. It's,
Okay.
I don't know how you want to.
It looks different than the
It looks
other
like
cells.
cream. Yeah, it looks real cream. It's thick. It's very thick because you can scrape it out and hang it up. It won't run. It's thicker than it would run, so it will just hang. So that around, I don't know of anybody that harvests that unless you're raising you are raising queens also. You might take a little bit. The honey, it's kind of a guessing game. I have certain boxes that I put honey in, and usually the first box that the bees fill honey in the spring, early summer, that's theirs. That's yours, mine's on top. Bees are hoarders, and they're big workers. So as long as there's flowers for them to gather nectar, and I give them space to store it, they'll just keep working. If everything gets filled up and there's no place to put it, one, they'll quit working, and two, they might even swarm like off season. Springtime, end of May, 1st of June is the big swarming season in Northwest Ohio. But we get some late swarms in September sometimes, and we think that some people's hives or the wild hives aren't near as big as ours. They just run out of room, so they think hey, things are still good, we got to split. So and those bees are basically doomed because when they take off, they'll never, the season's not long enough anymore to gather enough nectar to convert to honey to make it through the winter. So they are really doomed. So you just keep adding boxes, and so like the bottom, and it's like I said, it's a guess. You want to leave them about 70, 80 pounds of honey going into winter. So a lot of times I'll go along my hives like early September, and I just try to judge how much they weigh. I try to pick the back up, and if it's really light, if it's light, I can move it, then I will feed. One, I usually know how much honey is on, and maybe I won't have taken any off. Sometimes we have, crazy years where actually dry years are better for making honey than wet years. Now, we're going to have lots of flowers in the wet years, but the rain washes the nectar out of the flowers. So if it rains today, there's not a whole lot of nectar tomorrow, maybe 2 or 3 days in, then there's a lot more nectar for the bees to gather. So if it constantly rains like we're having this year, there's not a lot of honey. I got hives now that should be just overflowing with honey, and they got some, but they're not overflowing. I got small hives that are like borderline starving because there's just not enough bees to go out and gather honey because there's just not enough to gather. So it's a crazy thing. About 5 years ago, we had a really wet fall, and it's our honey season starts mid-May. It goes through, it usually ends the end of July, maybe the 1st of August. And then it started raining. I take my honey off, starts raining. The bees aren't gathering anything then. So now they're eating their winter supplies at the end of summer, going into fall. And by the time fall came, boy, there was some, we were feeding sugar water. And the reason we feed sugar water is it's full of sugar. It's good. It's not as good as honey for the bees, but it beats starving. So that's basically the reason I feed sugar water is to prevent starvation in the wintertime. When it gets too cold, they won't take honey. So January, I can't go out and feed them. I got to have all the food in there before winter comes. It's kind of like packing the barn full, and you can't reload the barn, or it's very difficult to reload the barn once winter comes.
And speaking of the barn and hay, I know if we didn't have our bees, though, to pollinate all that good hay and clover hay and so forth, we just wouldn't have the same amount of probably yield if we wouldn't have anything if we didn't have our bees. So they're important to all of us for all the work that they do and Yeah.
It's estimated that like 3 out of every 5 bites of food you eat can be related to a bee. You know, like corn, beans, wheat, rice. Most of our grains are not bee pollinated; they're wind pollinated. But all of our fruits and vegetables, and you know, you can look at your alfalfa. Well, what's that? Well, to raise alfalfa seed needs to be, that flower has to be pollinated. Same with clover. That flower needs to be pollinated if you're going to raise the next generation of seed for it. So bees are really important for us and for a lot of animals. If you were just going to feed your horse grass is wind pollinated. That's
one thing.
I guess you don't need the bees then.
But we do love our alfalfa and our different mixes of hay. So if someone did want to get into bees and they, you know, are thinking about their hay and their food sources and things like that, do you feel, I know it's a hard question to answer, but do you feel like it would be a hard thing to tell somebody to, you know, get started into bees? You had said before, contact somebody that knows about your bees, go to your local bee group or whatever and start to learn, but it all helps. The bees help all the way around for everybody because they go all over, so to speak, for pollination and so forth. The bees can find whatever they like best in your neighborhood. We have a black locust tree in our yard, and black locust tree is supposed to be like the bees' one of their favorite things. And this year is the first year that I've ever seen bees in my tree, because there must be something better when it's blooming that the bees go to first. Wow. We're finding out that soybeans in Northwest Ohio are a big honey crop, and the bees are working it, but since the flowers are underneath the foliage, we don't see the bees flying around a lot, but we're finding lots of soybean pollen. So this year with the late planting going on, I know my bees are going to have food longer into August, maybe even September, which is good for our bees, because I basically tell people that when my bees start flying in February, when the maples start blooming, they'll fly all the way to November. They need flowers from February to November to make food for them. So there's a lot of people I tell, you know, you don't have to have bees to help the bees. Grow flowers that the bees like. Any, you know, the seed catalogs have a whole list of pollinator friendly and flowers all those type thing.
Or, you know, if you got a alfalfa, if you let it bloom for a little bit, that's better than nothing. I know the protein content's, you know, ideal for, I know cattle, I don't know about horses, right when it starts to bloom, so a lot of people cut it, but if you would let it bloom for a little bit, you know, every little bit helps, and we all can help the bees, and by letting flowers grow, let the clover and dandelions grow in your home lawn. You know, we're trying to convince people that this immaculate green lawn is basically a green desert for all the insects. The butterflies, some of the things that we do, I have some family that do row crops, and several years ago they were growing some wheat for a landowner that wanted to do some tiling. I go, hey, when that wheat's off, can we plant buckwheat in there? Bees just love buckwheat, and it blooms fairly fast, like 4 weeks from planting it'll be blooming, 6 weeks it's gone, so we can plant that. And the first year wasn't too good, so we tried it the second year, and you know, the moon, sun, everything aligned, it was perfect. And you could park your truck there, get out of the truck, and as soon as you shut the key off, you could hear the bees humming in this field. It was just moving. There were so many bees in there, and it was humming, and that hooked my cousins on, we're growing buckwheat every year. Just because, cool. You know, once they see this go on and go, well, this is good for everybody. And so we got to convince everybody. We all have played a part in wanting that immaculate green lawn, and everything's got to be perfect.
Come back to where it should be,
right.
So we can have our
we're getting back
ecology the way we need it. Exactly.
This
is part of it.
Beekeeper groups, we're trying to work. We're finally, after so many years of pleading with like the state, we're trying to get them to plant along the interstates, go back to planting wildflowers and stuff instead of just
pretty to look at too.
Yeah, instead of just the green grass. But it's going to be a slow process because you always have those people that just want that perfect lawn, and they think that if they buy a flat or two of flowers at the Walmart store that's going to help, but it takes lots of flowers. I brought a 1 pound jar of honey in here, and for the bees to gather enough nectar to make this 1 pound of honey, it takes 2 million flowers.
Wow.
For this one jar of honey. So
little hard workers.
Yeah, if you go to the grocery store and see a 1 pound jar of honey, think about it was 2 million flowers to make that jar of honey.
And speaking of the honey, then just talking about some of the different, like the fields you're talking about of the flowers and that type of thing. Honey tastes different. It's local to, if it's local in your area. We also talked about helping with perhaps allergy, but also that the honey will taste different. So does the buckwheat honey, how does it, is it sweeter? Different honeys taste different from different areas. Do your honeys taste different from year to year? It does. Okay.
Yep.
So
every different seasons are different. If I'm sorting honey, the spring honey, and I usually call spring honey anything's made before the 4th of July, is my lightest color honey. June, end of June, into July is what most people know as the honey color. It's yellow, dark yellow, kind of orangey color. And then later in the year, we get some goldenrod, some other asters. That honey will even be darker yet. Buckwheat is completely black. It looks like molasses, tastes like molasses. I'm not a big fan. I don't care for it, but we have a good clientele that love our darker honey. My wife puts it on oatmeal in the wintertime. She really likes it. What we usually sell is we mix other honeys with it, and I relate honey to like wine. Different years the wines taste different. The drier years, as the bees are trying to dry this liquid down, just imagine when it's hot and humid and you're trying to dry it down, you just won't dry very fast. But like on the drought years, they'll make a lot of honey, and it's always a little sweeter because I think they get more of the water out of it, so there's actually more sugar in it, in that jar. So instead of we have a little tester. I can test my honey to see how much moisture's in it. Honey won't spoil as long as you get it below 18% moisture. More than 18%, it will spoil, and it basically turns to mead. And mead is fermented honey. It's about like making wine, but it'll do it on its own. But once you get it below 18%, there's not enough moisture in it, and it will keep forever. So the bees know this. This is some of the other amazing things. They know when that honey is concentrated enough, it won't spoil, and then they cover it with a layer of wax. So as a beekeeper, if it's covered with wax, I know it's harvestable. Sometimes at the end of the year, there's no more honey coming in, so we're not going to expend any energy to make wax to put over the honey, so we're just going to leave it as is. And that's where a lot of times I'll test it to make sure that my honey's dry enough that it won't spoil. If there's too much moisture in it, it usually goes back out to a hive of bees that maybe won't have enough honey to get through the winter, so instead of feeding them sugar water, they get some of this honey that's too wet for us to eat.
Wow. Wow.
Is there a way to keep it from crystallizing?
No. All real honey will eventually crystallize, and that's basically, it's going through a chemical process because there's so much sugar in it. They call it a super concentrate of sugar. It basically is trying to find neutral, and when it crystallizes and turns into a solid, it's going into like a neutral state. And when it crystallizes, you warm it back up in a pan of water or very gently in the microwave, and it will turn back to a liquid. But that's just the normal process. I got couple tons of honey at home, and it's all crystallized.
But that's a good sign because it's told
real.
us before.
It
real
means it's
honey.
real. Corn syrup, some of the reason we really push buying local honey from a local beekeeper, you can trust it. The honey that you buy at the store is probably not 100%, but if it's coming from more than one country, if it's not a product of the USA, if it's a product of Canada, Brazil, and everything else, there's probably Chinese honey in it. And we're pretty sure that the Chinese water some of their honey down with rice syrup or corn syrup. It's a lot cheaper. It won't crystallize either. When we first got into beekeeping, my wife got this cookbook out, and it said the old Germans wouldn't buy honey till it crystallized, because then they knew it was real and wasn't cut with like corn syrup or something. So,
And the local honey for allergies, is that something that you want to buy honey that's actually right in your area, or does it matter if it's just local to any area, you could eat that honey?
If you're buying the more local, you will have particles of pollen. The theory behind eating local honey is there's always some pollen mixed in with the honey. It just happens as the bees are gathering the nectar. There's some pollen particles that are going to get gathered and mixed in. The pollen particles are what you're allergic to. So by eating the local honey, you're getting this little dose of local pollen that either is good for you or has been making you have a stuffy nose. The theory is it's like getting an allergy shot, and it should help your
Bring
allergies.
it on a little bit at a time,
There's been some research. It's hard to, I'm sure it's hard in the research world to test this on this person and this person and this person. So, plus the people doing the research are the chemical companies who are making the pills that make you better. So they don't want this to work. I won't tell you that my honey will cure any allergies. No, nothing. In fact, I tell people, we live in the Black Swamp. Are you sure you're allergic to pollen, or are you allergic to mold?
Sure.
So, but I do have people, I could have a testimonial book a couple inches thick of people that just swear if they're taking a teaspoon or a tablespoon of honey every day that they do not take Claritin anymore. Their allergies seem to go away.
Do you know of anything else that you feel honey is good for too? Not that we're saying that you're, we're just saying what people have told you or whatever. This is, that honey
they use, there's a lot of newer research putting it on wounds, like cuts, because it's antimicrobial, antibacterial. So they're putting it on, you can buy Band-Aids, with some honey in it. It's like an antiseptic. I'm sure there are probably some home remedies for like horse wounds and stuff to
That's
smear the honey on,
and
it helps with, keeps it soft. It probably heals better. Stuff won't grow in it.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
so,
keeping it supple, exactly, because that's a big thing.
My wife was a RN at a hospital, and one of the doctors told her, "Oh yeah, they're using honey on some of the wounds." So I told her, I go, he happened to be a honey customer, but he was eating it. But I said, if he eats it, it's one price. But if he's using it for medicine, it's about
pharmaceutical price.
Yeah, it's
the pharmaceutical price instead of the honey price. There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, there's it's been around for thousands of years, and they've been using it.
Found it in the pyramids, haven't they?
Oh yeah,
still and it's all it's
crystallized, but it's still edible. It's still good to eat.
That's just crazy.
In the pyramids.
Yeah. I eat food.
Yeah. Well, all right. We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast and encourage you to share with all your equestrian family and friends. You can tune into the Late Night Riders podcast show every Friday night. Each episode will be uploaded exclusively on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest shows. Do you have a topic you'd like to discuss? We want to hear from you. You may email us at podcast@ramfence.com, or feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Roger.